So if you've got a holiday coming up and you don't want to lose all your gains, here's some tips to make sure all that dieting and working out wasn't all for nothing. The first tip I can give would be to find a gym. Make sure while you're away you know which gym you're going to be using, whether that's a hotel gym or if you've got to do a bit of research and find one, put the time in to do that. And try and make sure it's not too far away, or else you're going to probably end up making excuses and end up skipping days. And if there's absolutely no gym around you, you're in the complete wilderness maybe, then you can still do body weight stuff or even resistance bands. So there's really no excuse. And I know it's not the same as weights, but at the end of the day, it's better than nothing. Also, if you're planning to be drinking on holiday, which I imagine most of you are, then I'd suggest getting the workout done earlier on in the day, because the later you leave it, the more chance you're not going to end up doing it, especially if you start drinking. The next tip I give would be to use the Japanese diet method, and give me a second, I'll explain exactly what I mean by this. So I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce it, but here it is on the screen right now. And when translated, it reads, eat until you're 8 parts out of 10 full. And what this teaching is doing is instructing people to only eat until they're 80% full, to make sure that they don't overconsume, which is genuinely a good rule to stick by if you're trying not to gain any extra weight, especially while you're on holiday. The reason I'm bringing it up is because more than likely if you're on holiday, you're going to be going out to different restaurants and having loads of different meals, so tracking it is going to be near impossible, unless you have an extremely good calorie counting eye like me. So I'd use that Japanese diet method to make sure that you don't overconsume and just stop eating when you're about 80% full. But if you do end up overconsuming, then just balance out over the next few days and don't eat as much to make sure that your average calorie intake is about what it should be, roughly. The next tip would be to make sure to hit your protein, and a few tips to do that we'll get right into. I'd suggest perhaps focusing earlier on in the day, your meals like your breakfast and lunch, get as much protein in as you can. For example, you could have a 6-egg omelette for breakfast, that would work nice. Also, you can make sure to have loads of meats in all your meals to get enough protein in every meal. And I imagine you're not going to be cooking too much yourself, so even the pre-made protein shakes wouldn't be the worst idea, as long as if it's only temporary while you're on holiday. Then providing you're focused on your protein intake earlier on in the day, it allows for later in the evening when you do go to restaurants and have meals with your friends and family. You don't just have to get a meat platter to make sure you can get all your protein intake. If you think you've got close enough, then great. You can order a meal that you actually want to eat as opposed to having to eat what you must. Also, if you're staying by the beach, then I imagine there'll be a lot of seafood around, so that'll be high in protein, low in fats, depending on the fish. And that's a good way to get your protein intake while on holiday. Especially if you order an entire fish, then that's going to help a lot. And the next tip, cardio. At least for me, when I go away on holiday, I end up walking most places, I mean pretty much everywhere. So that's easy cardio I can get in, and it means I can have a little bit of an extra food because I'm burning the extra calories. Also, again, if you're near the beach, I do like a good beach walk, so I end up walking up and down the beach, which is an extra 45 to 60 minute walk of cardio, which will help again, especially if you're doing that every day. Now, on to alcohol. I mean, I don't really drink anymore anyway, so this isn't really an issue for me, but I know some of you will definitely be planning to drink, and that's probably the main reason you're going on holiday, to be honest. But remember, alcohol is full of loads of empty calories, so if you are going to consume a lot of alcohol, keep it in account because it all adds up at the end of the day, so you're going to have to sacrifice some foods in order to drink. In other words, if you're going to have a few beers, then you're going to have to eat a little bit less foods if you want your overall caloric intake to not go over into a surplus. And if you're having less food, then that's less food for less protein. So if you're in more of a meat only diet, maybe that would probably help because you're definitely going to hit your protein intake that way, while keeping your calories low while you're drinking as well. But again, it's not the most optimal way, but again, if it's temporary, it can work. And finally, the last tip, keep your good habits. Because I understand you're on holiday and you just want to relax, but the good habits you've built beforehand leading up to this holiday, you don't want to just throw out the window, because if you don't continue them in one way or the other, when it comes to after your holiday, it's going to be a lot harder to get back into the swing of things if you've just completely given them up. Even more so if you've ended up gaining weight, because then it's not just carrying on where you left off. You don't have to lose that extra weight that you've gained on holiday, which is going to be even more daunting. Or even trying to gain back muscle that you've potentially lost if you've been away for a significant amount of time. Whereas if you carried on training and limiting your caloric intake, not over consuming, then after your holiday you can carry on with your good habits, get back into routine a lot easier. As I said, you've kept the good habits that you've already built. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a lifestyle. So I hope some of those tips have helped you, and if you guys have any more tips to stay shredded while you're on holiday, leave them in the comments below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.